What is going on, IF Warriors? So it looks like you guys enjoyed my video that I put out on Monday where I'm just talking about how body fat works. I guess it helps you guys understand maybe where your frustrations lie when it comes to fat loss and how the process works and where you're wasting your time, like wearing sweatsuits, for example, because you think that you're sweating out the fat when more than likely you're breathing out the fat. So I'm glad that you guys enjoyed that video. It was one of those videos that I just wanted to, put it out to help, right? I didn't even expect it to do good. There's a lot of videos that I put on this channel nowadays that I don't really expect them to do good. I just, I know that there's a core audience that watches them, so it's really for them. So this video is kind of going to do the same thing, but we're going to talk about, what started this channel, what built this channel, which was intermittent fasting. Now, why does intermittent fasting work for some people, but it doesn't work for others? Now, I'm one of those people that I did everything under the sun before intermittent fasting. But once I did intermittent fasting, I just fully was able to take control of my fitness. I was fully able to take control of weight loss, right? And since then, I've read hundreds and hundreds of studies. So it's been about 10 years since 2013. Been reading studies and it's like nonstop, right? Every week. To this day, every week I'm reading multiple different studies that sometimes I can't even really make a video on because they're not polarizing, right? They're like little things about like one little hormone that has nothing to do with weight loss or something like that. But it's allowed me to understand a lot of elements, especially from the meta-analyses that come with intermittent fasting. Now, one thing that I will say is that no matter what any guru tells you out there, there is a slight advantage to fat loss when it comes to intermittent fasting. Now, it's cool, right, to be like the anti-intermittent fasting person and say that it doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form, but it matters to a small degree that could be a big deal later down the line. Every meta-analysis we've ever seen of intermittent fasting, even if there's no significant differences, there are always two things that are different in the exact same direction. Muscle loss tends to be higher in the intermittent fasting group than the normal calorie restriction group. But fat loss always seems to be lower in the intermittent fasting group. Even if it's not by much, it's always lower in the intermittent fasting group over the normal caloric restriction group. And this is easily explained because for example, muscle, right? Protein is one of the pillars of protein synthesis that helps with hypertrophy, with building muscle and muscle retention, and also calorie surplus. So being at a caloric surplus, and both calorie restriction and intermittent fasting are putting you, if you're trying to lose weight, they're putting you at a caloric deficit. So that pillar is already gone for both. But one thing that calorie restriction has over intermittent fasting is they have the luxury or the freedom of having high meal frequency, which is one of the other pillars. It's one of the pillars of protein synthesis. And that's what allows them to maintain or even build muscle depending on the recomposition. If you have a lot of body fat on you, you can actually build muscle and lose fat at the same time. So that's what allows them to have access to that better than intermittent fasting. Now, that doesn't mean that you lose muscle with intermittent fasting or you don't build muscle with intermittent fasting. That just simply means that you are not doing it at the most optimal possible than you are with caloric restriction. But on the flip side, because intermittent fasting gets into a state where you're now switched over from using glycogen, you've depleted that, your body has to go to ketones. And the only way you create ketone energy sources is using body fat, right? The fatty acids go into the liver through a process called beta hydroxybutyrate, and they turn into ketones. And those ketones fuel your brain for about 75% of its energy. And then, of course, after a certain period of time, everyone's different, which is why I always recommend using the lumen, link down below. you get into a state where it starts to break down muscle, right? Or it starts to break down amino acids for the other percentage that your brain needs, because your brain actually prefers glucose over ketones. Don't let nobody fool you. There's a lot of gun-ho, intermittent fasting enthusiasts out there that will tell you, no, your brain rather use ketones. If that was the case, why doesn't it produce ketones when there's glucose available? It only produces ketones when glucose is no longer available. So I digress. Anyways, because of that process, you're not only losing calories through the process of energy deficit or being at a net negative energy balance, you're also losing body fat specifically because of the process of ketone bodies. So there's like two little things that are happening all at the same time, as opposed to the caloric deficit people, the caloric restriction people. They have a meal frequency that's going to help with their building muscle, retaining muscle, but it isn't going to help them tap into ketone bodies. So there's the fat loss advantage, even if it's slight, for intermittent fasting, and there's a muscle retaining advantage, even though it's slight, for caloric restriction. So they're not exactly the same, right? They're not like the exact same thing to a T. They're not. They're different. But the mental and psychological elements of weight loss play an important role in why these work or don't work. For example, for me, it was harder for me to consistently always have to count calories and kind of do things in a way where I'm just measuring everything at all times, so that I can ensure that I'm doing my best, right? It's hard. And then when I'm like doing consistent meals, it's even harder because I'm consistently doing this over the course of a day, right? When I found intermittent fasting, what made it easier for me was that I've compressed everything to a short time window. Now I only have to really pay attention to my food and what I'm eating in a short period of time. There's also the fact that studies across the board show that on average, people underreport how much they eat by about 50%. And not because they're lying, not because they're like, I don't want them to know that I eat so much. It's because they truly do not think that they're overeating. They're under calculating, under measuring, they think that a few chips here that they didn't measure, and some peanuts over there that they didn't measure, and the French fries that they ate in the car that they didn't measure, and grabbing a few chicken nuggets from their kids that they didn't measure, and just a quick donut in the morning that they didn't measure, plus their meal that they measured. And so it's like they think that the other stuff is not that much because it's so spread apart and they're so uneventful. They're so uneventful. So what ends up happening is that they overeat without even knowing. And one thing that intermittent fasting helped me to do is to completely focus exactly on how much I'm eating and not have the problems of grazing, because what I call the invisible walls block me from eating outside of my eating window. And because I only get this small window to eat, I make sure that I'm putting in all these things that I want and putting in all these things that I can easily measure, right? Even if you want to use intermittent fasting to not measure or to measure or whatever, but measuring with intermittent fasting, it's easier because it's not so much that you're doing. It's one meal or two meals, right? So I measure with intermittent fasting, but it was much simpler for me. It was much simpler for me, and I knew that there wasn't going to be a way that I could stray from doing intermittent fasting correctly. But then there's the flip side where people just don't feel satisfied by eating all of their meals in one. They feel bloated, or they feel like it's too much food, and they prefer to spread their meals apart. And you're going to get camps that love spreading their meals apart and they're successful. And you're going to get camps of people that love doing intermittent fasting and they'll be successful. I'm one of those people that I've done the spread the meals apart thing, and it just didn't work for me on a consistent basis, because to me, really, the lifestyle change is the most important thing. The fact that, can I do this for the rest of my life? That's important to me. Now, with intermittent fasting, since 2013, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing intermittent fasting. Now, there are moments where I eat at a caloric surplus for long periods of time because I'm trying to, build muscle, and then I reduce calories to go in the opposite direction, to lean out. I do this every year, right? And these are, but still within the framework of intermittent fasting. And these are the things that matter. What is the most comfortable thing for you? People tell me that 6 meals a day is comfortable for them. It's hard. It's hard for me to fathom that 6 meals a day is comfortable. But for that person, maybe it is. They like making meals and prepping meals and doing all these things. Maybe they do, right? Maybe their motivation to be a certain way or live a certain lifestyle or be a pro athlete and something is a motivating factor that makes them happy when they do the 6 meals a day. But when it's all said and done, because there's the slight advantage of body fat and the slight advantage of calorie restriction alone without intermittent fasting with meal frequency, you can choose whichever one you want to do. But don't let any guru gaslight you to believe that intermittent fasting is worse than caloric restriction, and that intermittent fasting doesn't work because it matched caloric restriction in a study where, if you actually looked at the numbers more deeply, you'll see that intermittent fasting, the numbers are different, even though they're not statistically, numerically different. They are visually different, right? Because 3 pounds of body fat or 4 pounds of body fat, that can be a big visual difference. All right. So hopefully this video has helped you understand the kind of the psychology of weight loss in a basic sense, and why, it might work for you, but you can't understand why it doesn't work for someone else, and vice versa. They might have something else that they do that's not what you do, and they're like, well, what? And there's always this battle of like, which diet is better. But in reality, there should not be a battle, because whatever diet that you like, that works the best for you, that you feel, I'm on cruise control, that's probably the best diet for you. Until the next one, guys, peace out.